Boker Tov. Today's daf is Daf Yud Gimel in Gitin, as we learned for a refuah shleima for Elazar ben Uma and Yosef Zerah ben Chaim Yichal, and especially in honor of Kurt's birthday today, his Hebrew birthday. Says the Mishnah on Daf Yud Gimel Amar Aleph. Hamutun gets al ishti. A man says, "Give this get to my wife." Now he said tenu. Is tenu singular or plural? Plural, right? So he didn't give it to one shliach. He didn't give it to this person. Give a get, right? Or he said, "Give this shtar shichur zel abdi." The other day we had a machlokes between Rav Meir and the Chachamim. If a man says to an individual, "Give this get to my wife," or "Give this get shichur," Rav Meir says you can go back. If you didn't give it yet, you can go back on it. Rabbanan said no. Shtar shichur is an advantage for the slave to be free. So therefore, that was their opinion that he's better off because the master doesn't really have to feed him anyway. Therefore, he's better off being free. That was the attitude, and therefore the shliach could be mazaka it, can acquire it on behalf of the eved, whether he requires it right away or only in the sense that the master can't go back on it. That was the discussion we had. But over here, he didn't tell one individual. He said, "Hey guys, give this to my wife, give this get, or give my shtar to my eved." So the Mishnah says, "Well, you know, and then the guy died before he got a chance. Before any of them had a chance to give this get to give a get to his wife or give a shtar to his eved. You don't give it after death because the rule in Judaism is death is final. In death, we go to the next world. But as far as this world's gone, that's it. You can't do any transactions after you're dead. You can't, make anything happen after you're dead. At death, your assets are divided according to the Torah. Or if you gave it away before via a will, fine. But you have no power to do anything after you're dead. So after a man dies, he can't divorce his wife. He's dead already. Can't give a shach shichur. He doesn't own the slaves anymore. Right. That's what we're talking about. He didn't deliver it yet. Now, yesterday we had the issue of, yesterday and the day before, we had the issue of the shliach didn't deliver it yet. So if it's a get isha, so it's not a schus for him. It's not a schus for her to be divorced unless it is. But basically, if he's still alive, it's not a schus for him. She'd rather be married to him. If the point is that if he what was your question? If he gave it to him, right? So then it's not a divorce because he can't divorce her after he dies, and it's presumably it's not an advantage. He died suddenly; it wasn't an advantage for her to get divorced. In the case of the eved, is a machlokas. Is it an advantage for him to be or not? Rav Meir said it's not an advantage for him to be. He'd rather be an eved, rather fool around with the girls and do what he wants. We said, and you can't get this way. He can get if the master is the Kohen, he gets to eat truma. So Rav Meir held it was an advantage for him to be married, to be a slave. Therefore, it's not a schus for him. The Chacham said it is a schus, but that's only when you assigned a particular shliach, so the shliach could get it on his behalf. Let's say according to the Chachamim, it's an advantage for a shliach to be free. So the shliach could be mazaket for him immediately, but even before the guy dies. So if the guy died subsequently, the ever would still be free. But over here, it wasn't an individual. He said, "Tnu, you guys, would somebody give it?" He didn't assign an individual. There was nobody to be mazaket for him. So if he dies, you don't do it because after death, nothing takes place. You can't do anything after death. Let's say though a man, let's assume now he's on his deathbed and he says, "Give $100 to Yankel." Umeis, and then he dies, he'd give it. Now, how can he give it after death? After death, it's not his anymore. The answer is we'll see that it's as if he gave it right away. So even now, how does it work at this point? He gave it before he died, right? After death, he can't do anything. Correct. That applies in all cases, whether it's giving a get, giving a shtar shichur, doing any transaction, making a purchase. Once you're dead, you're dead. You can't do anything. Your assets go to your heirs, or however you distributed them before death, and you don't have the ability to divorce a wife or marry anybody, do anything. Once you're dead, you're dead. You can't do anything in this world. So when we say over here in this lesson, so as far as the get, whether it's a get for his wife or a get for a shtar shichur, is basically a get shichur for his eved, that's very clear. You can't give it after death. and we're speaking where he said it to several people. He didn't appoint the shliach. Or you could say it's speaking about the shita that we had before, even where there was one shliach. The two might be lavdaf. Maybe it's really maybe he gave it to individual shliach, but the shliach could only be mazaka for him in the sense that he can't go back on it according to that those shitas of the shitas of the chachamim of the Rishonim will say that the master cannot go back on the deal, but still the slave is not freed until he gets the shtar. And by the time he got the shtar, the master was dead. In other words, once you're dead, you can't affect any transaction subsequently. Okay, now what about the money though? That's what we're going to deal with now. A man on his deathbed said, we're assuming now he's on his deathbed, says, give $100 to Yankel. You can give it after death. You can give it after death. Why does it work after death? So like you say, because he really gave it before death. It goes in before. How does that work? When he said this $100 was sitting here in front of us. In other words, the Lashon of the Gemara is it was piled up and sitting in this corner, meaning it was a specific $100. He didn't say give $100 from my bank account or go to the bank and take out $100. He said this particular money give to Yankel. That's what Yitzchak Bar Shmuel Bar Marsa says in the name of Rav. That's what we're speaking about this case. So the Gemara says, why does it have to be? You're talking about this specific $100. Why? If we're talking about a healthy person said, give this money, give $100 to Yankel, and then he had an accident and he died. So what if it's piled up here? What if the money's sitting here? How does he acquire it? We know you have to make the Chacham said all kinds of various kinyanim. Some say that there are kinyanim that are daraisa, right? Like we just had in Rus, right, with the Kinya Chalipin when they made a deal there. But basically the kinyanim are mostly a daraisa. Or a drabanan. What do we mean by that? What affects a transaction? If I transfer something to you, you give something to me, you sell something to somebody, it's basically the will of the person who's giving it and the will of the person who's accepting it. You can't force me to accept the gift, and I can't force you to take a gift. I can't force you to sell something to me. You can't force me to buy something from you. It's all based on the acknowledgement and the will of the two parties involved. However, the Chacham said we need symbolic transaction. We need some symbolic action which affects it. So we know that's what he meant to do. When it comes to metaltalin, and when it comes to karka, right, you can kesef shtar or chazaka. There's different ways to do it, with cash or a shtar, or showing some sort of ownership on it, putting a fence around it. The Chacham said various kinyanim. When it comes to metaltalin movables, you got to pick it up. You got to pull it if it's heavy, or if it's light, you pick it up. Hagbah, the various kinyanim. So he says, how does this work? If we're talking about the person who died eventually, the person who said, give Yankel, let's say Reuben, we'll call him Reuben. Reuben said to a few people, give Yankel $100. All right, so even after Reuben, and then Reuben dies, you still give it to Yankel. Why? Because it took place before. So the question is, how did it take place? If Reuben was a healthy person, right? Reuben was a healthy person, so you give it. So Yankel had to get the money before. He had to make a mashiach. He had to pull it. It's metaltalin, right? He's giving it. So how did he acquire it? He just said it's sitting there. So what if it's sitting there? What happens? It's piled up. It's right there. He didn't pull it. Maybe we're speaking of a person who's on his deathbed. He's on his deathbed. So Myri Tzibur, why does it have to be piled up? Can't Tzibur Nami? If a man on his deathbed says, give this thing, you give it to him. It doesn't have to be the money, it has to be right here. Can't Tzibur Nami. The rabbis made a takana in order for a person on his deathbed not to be upset and be concerned about where are the lawyers, where's the secretary, who's going to write this up, who's going to type this up. If a shemara says do something, it's done. It's as if it's written down and handed over. So what's this business that Rav Yitzchak Bar Shmuel Bar Marsa says in the name of Rav? Rav says, you know what? It only works in our Mishnah when a guy said, give Yankel $100, and then the guy died. You give Yankel the $100, presumably because it was chal before. Why? And Rav says, if the money was sitting here, the money with this, he was referring to this $100 sitting right over here in the corner. Why? If Reuben was healthy and then met with an accident and that's how he died, so how does it help that the money's sitting here? Yankel had to make a mashiach before he died. Otherwise, it was still Reuben's until the time of death. How can you give it afterwards? You can't give it away afterwards. After Reuben dies, it belongs to Reuben's children. And we're going with the shita, says the Gemara. We're going with the shita that we don't hold the mitzvah l'kaim divrei messes. A shaila, do you have to fulfill the words of the children obligated to fulfill the father's wishes? That's like a drabanan. You do it. So some say you do, some say you don't. If you hold, you don't have to fulfill the father's wishes. So if the father met his demise, right? He had an accident and the money wasn't given. The children don't have to give it away. They could choose to give it away, to do whatever they want with the money. So if we're talking about a healthy person, how does it work? And if he's on his deathbed, why does the money have to be piled up there anyway? Whatever he says is done. If he says, take $100 out of my bank account and do it, you do it. So there's two answers. Rav says, lo babar. Rav says, we're talking about, say, a healthy person. Ukurafuna Marav, right? Rav Marav says, Rav Marav, a famous way of making a kinyan. We know there's Mashicha, Hagbah, Alipin, other kind. He says, there's another kind of thing called Maimin Shloshin. Manali biyadcha. There's three people, Reuben, Shimon, and Levi. Reuben had lent money to Shimon, or given money to Shimon to hold on to. Manali biyadcha. Reuben says to Shimon, you have $100 of mine. Tanula Laploni, give it to Levi, right? The Maimin Shloshin in the presence of all three kana. That's a special kind. Nobody shook hands. Nobody transferred anything. Three people are standing there. Reuben says to Shimon, the money I gave you to hold on to me, give it to Levi. They're all there. They all agree. It's done. That's how it works. So he held. So why does he's really speaking of Bari? So where was the Mashicha? Yankov didn't pull the money before Reuben died. The answer is there were three people there. Reuben said to Shimon, the money that I have, that's the money that I have. This money that's Sabura, and this money that you have over here that's sitting there with you. I asked you to hold $100 for me. That $100, I want you to give it to Levi. That's how it works, even though there was no Mashicha. Right? So therefore, the first opinion of Rav Zvid is that our Mishnah is speaking about a healthy person. But even though Yankov did not pull the money, did not make a Mashiach, did not make a kinyan, he made another kind of kinyan, a kinyan called Maimin Shloshdan, which is another kinyan drop on, and it works that way. As long as they all want to participate, they all agree. Rav Papa Omer la'olam shchimera. Rav is really speaking about shchimera. Hands on his deathbed. So if it's on his deathbed, why does it have to be put in a pile over here? Anything he wishes. Ukidich Rav, another Rav, Rav shchimera shomer tnu mana leploni min nechasai. If Shimon says, listen, give $100 for my assets to Yankel, Monazeh, if he said this particular $100, no, so you give it. Monastame, no, but if he says, Stam, give $100 for my assets, he didn't say which $100. He didn't say $100 in the drawer. He said, give him $100, you don't give it to him. Why? Chashin and Shema monokavor. You're afraid, we're concerned that maybe he meant the $100 that he had in a safe deposit box, or $100 buried somewhere. He meant to give him a different $100, not this $100. In other words, if you said Stam, give him $100, you don't give it to him. Why? Because we're afraid maybe he meant a particular $100, that not any $100, but a particular $100. That's what Rav said, and that's what we're speaking about over here. So therefore, Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Shmuel Bar Masa said, in the name of Rav, this that the Mishnah says you give $100 to Yankel, and after he dies, you still give the $100. So two opinions. Rav Zvid said it's speaking about a healthy person, but there was a kinyan of Maimin Shloshdan while Reuben was alive. Rav Papa says, no, we're talking about a shchimera. But the reason why the money has to be there, is because, according to Rav Zvid, the money has to be there because the money has to be in front of us. Maimin Shloshdan only works that way if the money is here. Meaning Reuben had given it to Shimon as a pikadon, as a deposit. We said that $100 that you have, give it to Levi. Or Rav Papa says, no, we're talking about a shchimera. But another halacha of Rav says that even a shchimera who says give $100 to Yankel, it works. It's only if he said this specific $100, not if he said any $100, because we're afraid maybe he meant a different $100 that he had buried somewhere. The Hilchos of the Gemara says on the last line of the page, L'kfur lachashinan. Incidentally, the Gemara is telling you the halacha is that we're not worried about that you buried the money. We're not worried about that. In other words, if a shchimera says give $100 to Yankel, whether he says this $100 or $100, you give it to him. You give it to him. Because it doesn't work because he's not worried that he hid it somewhere. He wanted to give him $100, give him $100. Whether it's this $100, it doesn't make any difference. That's the halacha. But Rav Papa said that's why Rav Yitzchak Bar Masa, Rav Shmuel Bar Masa said in the name of Rav that the money has to be there because he held that it only works if you're talking about a specific $100. So pretty much the Mefarshim say that they explain the Mishnah speaking about a shimra this last case. But why did Rav Papa my time alone Makrobsbit? Why did Rav Papa say it's a shimra and not speaking about the case of a bari with Maimin Shloshdan? So Rav Papa held Kiyam Rav. When did Rav say that Maimin Shloshdan works? Lo shnam b'milva lo shnam pikadon. It doesn't make any difference if it was a loan or a pikadon. What do I mean? A milva, when Reuben gives Shimon Shimon comes to him and says, lend me $100. When Shimon has to repay the $100, is it the same $100? Of course not. He borrowed the money because he had to buy a car or do something or get married or do something with the money, right? So he doesn't take it. That's a milva. Milva load son, and it's not the same $100. A pikadon, if I ask you to hold this money for me, I'm giving, could you have a safe in your home? Could you please put this away from your home? That's a pikadon. You're not supposed to use the money. So Rav Papa said, when Rav said that Maimon Shloshim works, in other words, we're three people there. Reuben says to Shimon, the $100 that I gave you, give it to Levi, that works. Doesn't make any difference if I lent you, Shimon, the $100, meaning it's not the same $100, or I gave you pikadon, it's the exact same $100, works either way. Therefore, it didn't have to be the money that's going to be set aside here. We said over here, give the $100 to give the $100 to, Reuben says, give $100 to Levi, let's say, or to Yankel, or to Levi. It makes no difference if the money's here or not here, because if it works because of Maimon Shloshim, it doesn't make any difference. Reuben says to Shimon, the $100 that I lent you, which isn't here anymore, but you owe it, right? Give that to Levi. Or the $100 that I gave you to watch for me, to put in your safe and watch for me, it works either way. So there's no reason to say that our mission is speaking about only when this money was set aside here, because it works even if the money wasn't set aside. Even if the money was lent to Shimon, he's lent it to Shimon. He said, Shimon, give it to Levi now. The money that you owe me, you owe him now. That also works. So therefore, you can't say that our mission is speaking where you put the money right here. It works even if he didn't put the money right here. Therefore, Rav Papa didn't say the answer of Rav Zvid. We're speaking about Maimon Shloshim, because Maimon Shloshim works even if the money's not over here. Even if I lent you the money and the money's not here right now, and I said the money that I lent you, give it to him, that works too. So except Rav Papa, Rav said that that Maimon Shloshim works, lo shnim b'milva, which is lo tzon, meaning the money's not here right now. I'm not expecting you to get the same house. When somebody borrows money from the bank, you're not going to get. I go to the bank and I borrow $100. When I give them back $100, it's not the same $100, right? It's a different trust. I spent that money. So lo shnim b'milva. So therefore, that money doesn't have to be Rav Zvid. My time lo Rav Papa. So why did Rav Zvid, who said the answer of that it's a bari and it's Maimon Shloshim, why didn't he give the answer of Shchim Rav? He says, Lo took masisim b'Shchim Rav. Listen to this, what Papa says. Our mission is not speaking about a Shchim Rav. Why? How do you know our mission is not speaking about Mimai? Midik Tani, it says, listen what he said. Homer Tnu gets Eli Ishti Ushtar Shechus Ela Avdi. What was the Lashon of the Mishnah? The first part of the Mishnah said, because he learns that the whole Mishnah is speaking about the Mishnah can't be speaking about Shchim Rav, because look at the first part of the Mishnah, not the part about the money. When he said, give this get to my wife, or Shechus Ela Avdi, Umeis, and then the guy died, right? Because after death, you can't divorce her, you can't free the slave, it's not yours anymore. Time of the mace, because he died, doesn't work. Hamachayim, but while he's alive, you would give it. No sin, you would give it. If the guy's still alive, right? You would give it. Time of Amr Tnu, because he said Tnu, give it. Hello Amr Tnu, but if he didn't say Tnu, ain't no sin. Right? That's what the Mishnah says. If the guy's alive, you can give it. He said to a bunch of people over there, oh guys, do me a favor, give a get to my wife. Or give a guy shashachar. If the guy's still alive, you can give it. Yeah, but by shchimera, he doesn't have to say tenu. Ushchimera afagat delomer tenu nosnim. Even if he didn't say give it, ditnan, we learned. In other words, he said tenu, give it to my wife. Sounds like because he said give it. Let's say he didn't say give it. Let's say he just said write a get for my wife. Guys, I'm dying over here. Write a get for my wife. Does that work? So we'll see that works even if he didn't say give it, because he meant to. He's confused. He's on his deathbed. Ditnan, we learned. They used to say, a man is being taken out in chains, being taken out to killed. The government's killing him. He's going out to be decapitated or whatever. He said, kiss forget lishti, write a get for my wife. Why would a man want to write a get for his wife as he's being taken out? To avoid yibam, right? So he said, give a get to my wife. He didn't say give it. He just said, oh, write a get for my wife. Write a get for my wife. He meant to say give it also, obviously. He's going out to be killed. So you give it. Because obviously he's just confused, but he meant to give it. Chazru Lomar, then they added on, Afam Afarish, even a person who's going on an overseas trip, he's going on an ocean. Those days, the ocean liners weren't ocean liners. They were like rafts by our standards, right? You went out on a trip on the ocean, not everybody came back in those days, right? Right? Or Hayotze B'Shira going out to over the desert, where there's all kinds of things can befall him. So those were dangerous trips. So they said even a guy like that who went on an ocean liner or went on a midbar, also if he said, write a get for my wife, he meant to say write it and give it, because he was thinking there's a good chance he'll die. Reb Shimon Shazuri Omer, he had an Afamasuk, and even a person on his deathbed, person's very sick. He also, if he said, write a get for my wife, he meant to say write it and give it. Oh, very good. So if we're speaking about a shchimera in our Mishnah, why does it have to say tnu? This should just say kisvu, it would be enough. The fact that he said tnu says mashma that it's not just a shchimera, we're talking about a regular person. So therefore, Rav Zvid held, we're not talking about, the Mishnah's not talking about a shchimera. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to say tnu, we could just say kisvu. Okay, that was his answer. However, so the Gemara says, Maskal Rashi, Man Leiman de Masis Rav Shimon Shazuri. Rav Shimon Shazuri says, not only a person being taken out to be killed by the government, or a person going on the ocean or in the desert, but even a person who's sick. That's what Shimon Shazuri's add-on. Maybe go like, maybe I'm just going like the Rabbanan who say, no, even a Shemira must say, give a get, write a get and give a get to my wife. A person who's being killed, about to die, or he's going on a trip, maybe not, he can just say kisfu. But he could just say kisvu. But a person who's on his deathbed, he should say tunu, and therefore maybe our Mishnah is speaking about a shemira. So therefore, we have two different meanings. What's the Mishnah speaking about? Is it a shemira or is it a bari? Gufa. Let's analyze the case of Ma'amid Shloshim. Gufa Amarav Amarav said, "Manali bi'adcha." Reuben, Shimon, and Levi. Reuben says to Shimon, "The $100 that I gave you or I lent you, give that to Levi." That works. Tunu leploni. The Ma'amid Shloshim kana. That's a special halach again. The rabbi said, this is the symbolic transaction. We'll see why. Why does that work? Because the rabbis wanted to avoid confusion. Again, the real way a kinyan works is if a man goes over and forces a woman, puts a ring on her hand and says, is that there? No, she has to agree. It's a transaction, right? He's buying her. Same thing if I buy your car. You have to agree. If I give you $10,000 and I say, give me the keys, I grab the keys. I mean, it's not mine. You have to want to sell it to me. It's not the physical, action that we do of the ishtar. It's the intent. The intent has to be there. Okay, but the rabbi said different things work different way. Karka, kesef shtar chazaka. A woman, they also the kesef over shtar over bia, right? Kesef shtar bia. Different things about how you acquire things, right? Metalclin has to be picked up. We said really there's machlokus about that, whether maybe money really does buy it, but the predominant opinion is that why do they say maybe there's one opinion that says really the money is koned, right? But we're afraid they'll say guy buys wheat and he paid for it, then he didn't pick it up yet, and he says, oh well, you bought it, it burned down, so because then we said mashiach. So the rabbis made different. Gufa amrav hu namrav. Marli biatcha tunu lepayin b'amishashin kana. Amarav mistavim milsted Rav. So Rav said Rav's probably speaking about pikadon. The money's there. Reuben said to Shimon, the money that I deposited, I gave it yesterday. It's in your safe. Give it to Levi now. That works. Milvalo, but not if Reuben had lent money to Shimon because that money's gone. Right? He spent it already. He owes it to him. Milvalo. That's what Rav said. V'alokim. He argued. V'alokim amrav afilu b'milva. But the Gemara argued and said, no, it's not, they argued with him. They said, what are you talking about? Rav said as halacha, whether Reuben had lent money to Shimon or deposited with him. I have a loan in your hands. I lent you an house. Give it to Levi. Time am I. What's the reason why that works? So why would that work? Why would that work? Where's the transaction? Right? Reuben says to Shimon, the money I gave you, give it to him. Why does that work? Mine. So we'll see why. The time of mine. Amar Meimar, Nasaka Omerlo, it's as if he told him B'shas Matmos. It's as if when Reuven originally gave the money to Shimon, when he originally gave it to him, he said, Shibana lecha levidach ulechol dasimas machas. As if Shimon said, I'm going to be obligated to, this $100. Thank you so much for lending me the $100. I'll pay you back, or anybody else who comes in, who you designate, anybody else who comes in your place, right? Anybody else who you tell me to pay, I'll be glad to pay them. That's how it works. It's as if he said b'shas matmos when he originally. It's as if when Reuben gave the money to Shimon, Shimon said, "I'm obligated to you, or anybody who comes in your place, anybody who takes your place, who you designate, who you tell me to pay, I'll pay." If that's how it works, how does it work? Because Shimon said to Reuben, "I'll pay back you or whoever you tell me to pay." What happens if he says, Reuben gave the money to Shimon, right? In 1980, 30 years later, in 2010, he says, "I'll give it to Levi, my grandson, who was born a few years ago." Levi wasn't around in 1980. How can he give it? As if he said in 1980, I'll give it to you or to whoever you tell me to pay in your place. That only works if a guy was around then. If Levi was around in 1980, if Levi wasn't around then, how should that work? To people who were born later on, then it wouldn't work. Now you're saying that Ma'amid Shloshim only works if all three were alive at the time when Reuben gave the money to Shimon. The Dafil, even Rav Meir holds out of Makdav Shalom. Remember the famous Achlokas, can you sell fruits that aren't? I'm selling you the future fruits that are going to grow this year. Can you do that? It's not here yet. Rav Meir says you can. Even Rav Meir says that you could sell things which aren't here yet or give it away, things that aren't here. That's if you're selling it to somebody who is here right now. But you can't give it to somebody who's not here yet. So how could that work? If the Svar of Ma'amid Shloshim works, is because it's as if Shimon said to Reuben when he got the money originally, I'll give it to you or whoever you designate. Well, Ravashi must be a different reason at the top of your dalit. I'll tell you why. You know why it works? Because when Shimon owes the money to Reuben now, right? Either it was a loan or a deposit. He has to give it to Reuben. Now, when Reuben says, okay, you don't have to give it to me, give it back to Levi. So Shimon feels a little bit of a respite. He's not, if you owe money to somebody, there's always a feeling of there's a tension. I got to pay back. I know I owe you the money. Oh, now I owe it to another guy. Oh, now I got some more time. In other words, it's like a new loan. Now you got more time to pay back. But here, no, with this pleasure, the Kamishtanele, that the loan has now been transformed. The Milva Yeshana, the Milva Chadash, was from an old loan that I still owe the money. Oh, it's a new loan now, and I got extra time. I'm not under the same pressure to pay it back because I have a new creditor now, right? Instead of Reuben, I got to pay Levi, right? So that Gomer Mashava Nafshe, therefore he is willing to obligate himself. Again, the concept of a kinyan always is that the person who's giving it wants to give it, and the person who wants to accept it has to accept it, right? So here also the person. Levi, Shimon, who now is obligated to pay, is willing to obligate himself to Levi. He's willing to obligate himself to Levi because he's getting more time, so to speak. He's getting like a new loan. We're going to change the loan, like HFC, we're going to take all your loans away, put it all in one big new loan, and now you start all over again, right? If that's the svar why Ma'amid Shloshim works, is because Shimon's willing to obligate himself because he's got more time now. What about the people Bar Yeshiv? These are like the loan sharks of the time. These people, when you owe them money, the kafsi v'shakul altar, they tie you up and take the money right away. Are you going to say that? Well, it depends on who the creditor is. If Levi is one of the family of Bar Yeshiv, who are tough guys, when you owe them money, they tie you up and they get a then you wouldn't acquire. In other words, it only works because Shimon's willing to say, oh, I'd be glad to get a new creditor, Levi, instead of Reuben. What happens if Levi is a tough guy? Then it wouldn't work. And you say, yeah, maybe it wouldn't work. Then it all depends. You're making your different standards. It depends on who the individual is. The rabbi said, here's what the Ma'amid Shloshim works. If Reuben says to Shimon, the money I have with you, now you give to Levi, it works in all cases. It shouldn't depend on who Levi is. Elamar Mar Sutra. Why does Ma'amid Shloshim work? Hani Tlasmil. There are three things we're going to say now. Shavin Rabban Kilsim time. When something's a daraisa, we don't ask a reason for it, right? There's a kachok, paraduma, why does it work? Matami the Torah, matara the Tmeim. Things in Torah, it works. So the rabbi said they made three halachas, which are also, it's like, we don't have to give a reason for it. It's like a halacha without a reason. What a charaha, one is this a Ma'amid Shloshim. The other halacha that they said, Rabbi Shmuel, hakosim chas a man gives all his assets to his wife. It's normal for a person to give his assets to his children or his heirs, right? And let's say his wife, he wrote everything over to her, right? In those days, lo asal he didn't really mean to give it to her. He's giving her kavod, that she should manage it for it. She should be the apotropos, the guardian, right? She should be the apotropos for them. He didn't really mean to give it to her that the kids don't get it. He just meant to say she's the apotropos. That's what the Chum said. So even if he wrote a star and he gave it to her, he didn't mean it literally. That's another halacha that they said, without a reason, apparently. The Edith, another halacha said, Damar Tananya, I may say Isha Libnogar. Let's say a man marries off his oldest son, the bias, and he made the wedding in a special house for the son. He bought a new house and he made the wedding there. Kind of the son acquires the house. That's the deal that the Chum said, because if he made it in a special house for the child, he meant to give it to him, even though there was no formal transaction, no formal shtar. The son acquired these three halachas. The rabbi said, so to speak, without a top. Tosa said there is a tom for them. Tosa says there is a tom. So Rashi says you don't have to give a reason, right? But the Tosa in the second Tosa says there is a reason for each one. There is a reason why the Chamer Tekana. So you shouldn't have to make a special kinyan. Shimon has to give it back to Reuben, then Reuben has to give it to Shimon. You don't have to be mamait in order to minimize the kinyanim. Make it simpler. The Chum said to make for ease of transactions, like for make deals. Like today, when you do things with emails instead of faxes, or wires instead of checks, get lost in the mail. The Chum wanted to make it easier for commerce. Also, obviously, why would a man write his children out of the will? Person doesn't want to do that. Obviously, he just wanted to give her kavod. That was the reason. He wanted to make her an apotropos. And they should know also, if he took all his stuff out of the house, man took all his possessions out of the house and left it for the chasam and kali, meant to give it to them. So there's reasons for these three things. So here also, Mamit Shloshim, that's the kind of kinyan that the Rabbanan said. It's not a svara. It means it's not. They didn't specify the reason. They didn't give you the reason. They didn't say that. Give you the reason so you could start interpreting like we're doing and saying, well, if this reason doesn't apply, how do you make sense? Like we gave one reason. We said because it's as if he said, at the original time of the loan or the time of the deposit, I'll give it to you whoever. But that doesn't work if it's a guy was born later on. If the reason is because I'm willing to, because I get a new loan now, I have more time. Yeah, what about if the guys are ruffians? What if it's mafia and they want their money right away? So we don't start giving reasons when it would apply, not apply. The Rabbanan said Mamit Shloshim works. The reason is obviously because they wanted to make all the kinyanim they made, or to make the commerce easier, to make less misunderstandings, to make it very clear. That was one of the kinyanim that he set up. Amalei Rav Ravacha Bar Dala. Rav said to Ravacha Bar Dala, and in this way, Rav is the one who said this business about Mamit Shloshim. Says, cover the Marika Isli Gabach. I've got a measure of saffron with you. I gave you some saffron to watch for me. Yavil Ploni, give it to Yankel over here. Levi, give it to Yankel. And I'm telling you in front of him, the Lord, I'm not going to go back on that. I'm giving it to Yankel, and I'm telling you right now, in front of him, I'm telling you that I'm not going to go back on it. It says Machlal di boy Harbe. What do you mean? If I wanted to, I could go back on it. It's if he's saying in the Havman, we're assuming that he said, I'm saying it to you in front of him, and I promise you I'm not going to go back on it. Mashma, he could go back on it. He could be an Indian giver. Machlal di boy Harbe, Matzi Harbe. If he wanted to, he could go back. He can't go back on it. Once you make a kinyan, it's done. Once I say the money that the saffron that I have with you, I want you to give it to Levi or give it to Yankel. It's Yankel's, and that's it. The deal is done. So what do you mean? I'm telling you that I'm promising you I'm not going to go back on it. No, he's not saying I promise you in front of him that I'm not going to get back. I can't go back on it since I did a Maimer Shloshton, which is a valid kinyan. You can't go back on it. These things cannot go back. You can't go back on it because they're valid kinyanim. If that's the case, so what's the chiddush in that? Amarav Chanazim, you already said. Amarav Huna Amarav. We had before. Manami biyadcha tnu leploni b'ma'amid shlosh mikana. Rav had this halacha. We've already said it 3 times on today's learning. Amarav Huna Amarav. Manami biyadcha. Reuben said to Shimon, the money that I have with you, the $100, whether it was a loan or whether it's a pikadon, give it to Ploni. If they're all standing there, it's in the presence of all 3. It's kana. So Rav already told us this halacha. What is he telling me? What's Rav telling you? The saffron that I have with you, I want you to give it to him. And not that I promise I won't go back on it. I can't go back on it. You already said this halacha before. That might be by a large loan, right? By a large amount of money, there I might think there you need slowly boy. This business that you have maybe that only works. It's only necessary if it's all 3 are there. But by a small gift, like a little bit of saffron, maybe you don't need it to fun of. Like a big one, but over here, by a small thing like a little bit of saffron, maybe they don't all 3 be there. And it could be a kinyan, even if he just said it to the depositee, right, to the person who had the saffron, had the money, they don't all have to be there. Kamash Malon, no. Kamash Malon, Rashi says, the covenant marika, the matan was, even though it's a small gift, it's a small amount, also boy namapay. In other words, the way Ma'amid Shloshim works is only if they're all three there. Reuben says to Shimon, by the way, the money that I gave you, gave gift to Levi, and Levi's not here, it doesn't work. It's only Ma'amid Shloshim if all three are present. That's how it works. All right, we'll pick them here tomorrow. Have a good day.